Pojadeges nati, adix junung nati, aradnatang nung rakponati pona, asutus sori ater puhukritugi pona, aukritugi noj udatum, aparetrum. Ater potagesi pona, agesi casses, purch ponum a arton, a mupus ponum, ater potagori pona, a agori garodz, agesi Garodzdat. Parigo. Garodzdat, or Harish, is a constructed language I've been working on and off for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's finally in a state where I'd be able to make a video about it. In this video I'll be using both the name of the language its speakers give it, Garodzdat, as well as the anglicized version of the name, Harish, just to switch things up. Garodzdat is spoken on this part of the West continent, with its temperate landscape being predominantly forest surrounded by mountains on the north and east, and the Ruton River running on the west. The language was long believed to be a language isolate until the discovery of its distant relation to the Mingwan languages way out here, and its even more distant relation to the other major language family on the continent, the Frager-Zafo family. The Harish people have been living here for around 400 years after crossing the Pojadeges Mountains. When I was creating the language, I envisioned the speakers as being a fairly brutish and barbaric people, or at least viewed as such by their neighbors. Maybe because of the short and stocky stature and the large bushy beards the men keep. Garodzdat has several varieties, mainly divided into the southern dialects and the northern dialects, but the one of the capital city, Radix, is the standard dialect, used during trade or international affairs, and the one I'll be talking about today. The phonemic inventory is quite minimalistic, with only 10 consonants and 5 vowels, though the letter representing na is pronounced as ma in many words irregularly, but is still written as the same letter. Same goes for o being pronounced as ö. They do use the unvoiced velar fricative, rarely to avoid vowel hiatus, but it isn't seen as a phoneme. All in all, Garodzdat's consonants are na, nga, pa, ta, da, ka, ga, ra, sa, ja. A simple phonology for a simple people. The syllable structure is fairly free, CCC, CCC, and even sometimes instead of the vowel, there might be an alveolar trill, ra, leading to words like jprt, meaning fish. However, all words except verbs must end in a consonant, for word final vowels are reserved for verb conjugation. The Harish script is an abjad, similar to Arabic or Farsi, meaning only the consonants are written down, and in some circumstances the vowels can be written as diacritics. They write from left to right. As you can see, the language is SVO and prodrop, with every new clause being on a new line, one below the last. But Dezan, what counts as a clause? I hear you asking. I'm getting there. In English, we can have a sentence with several parts that form a whole, not in Garodzdat. There are 3 main reasons to form a new clause, either to state a new regular sentence, as we would in English, to differentiate between direct and indirect object, and to state position or direction. The clause must have a verb, and all this information must be in its own sentence, thus minimal recursion for you universal grammar people. But that can get really wordy and misleading really fast. So how do we combat this? A heavy use of personal pronouns. Happy Pride Month, everybody. That, yes, distinguish between gender, but also if the noun that the pronoun represents comes before or after the pronoun. Ter, describing the little person that is mentioned before, and teng, describing the dog in a tree that is mentioned after. Garodzdat even has the upper hand over English in a few things. Let's take the English sentence, Sally went to Dr. Jess because she had a question. Who had the question? Of course, we can put our trust in context, but even then we might not be sure. But in Harish, there's a difference in pronoun, for if it's referring to something that was a subject or an object in a previous clause. That, already mentioned, and was the subject in the previous clause. Tetung, already mentioned, and was the object in a previous clause. Garodzdat is a highly agglutinative language in some aspects, highly relying on prefixes for the meaning of a clause. There are prefixes for negation, habitualness, direction, doing something with someone, marking the indirect object, as well as a plural prefix, po. Used for nouns as well as verbs, while the po prefixes may be omitted in some circumstances as long as there is another one giving context. Now you might remember that the function of clause can be to state position. However, Harish has no prepositions or postpositions. Instead, it has what I've called, for lack of a better word, positional verbs. This might well exist in some real language, but I haven't heard of it, so feel free to tell me if you know. So, positional verbs. In English, we have something in, on, under, over, behind, in front of something else. Whereas in Garodzdat, we take the thing in the more quote-unquote dominant position that becomes the subject. Then what is doing to the other thing as a verb, the relation between in and around, we have contains. For behind and in front of, covers. For on and under, where under is the more dominant position, we have hold or holds. For beneath and above, where above is the more dominant position, overseas. As you might have seen in the example sentences from before, Harish uses a particle system for expressing tense. Fairly simple, two particles, one for past and one for future, rak and till, respectively. These particles can be omitted in a clause if there is enough context in the surrounding ones. But these aren't the only particles. The Garoj people don't count days like we do. Rather than using a set week cycle from Monday to Sunday, they have a relative day system. Words like yesterday, today, and tomorrow are much more important. In fact, they go one step further, going from the day before yesterday to the day after tomorrow, resulting in 5 words all named after fingers. Yes, you heard me right. Fingers. Garodzdat has a deep connection to its sign language form, in which, to indicate that something took place the day before yesterday, you lift your thumb. Yesterday, your index finger, and so on. To the pinky, meaning the day after tomorrow. Another particularity of Harish is something that, for simplicity's sake, I'd call a fourth person. Though it doesn't have a designated pronoun, mainly because it can be used in so many situations, all of them circulating around a vague idea of generalness or otherworldliness. Like, you know how in English when you say it's raining, there isn't really an it that is raining, rather that's where you would use this fourth person verb ending. Another situation is when referring to a god or nature in some sense, or when expressing the general they. When saying they eat snails in France, kind of like the French. That's basically all I wanted to tell you. Rich and tin poparida.